And we just want to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting.
Where did you learn such good English? That's what Donald Trump allegedly asked President Joseph Boakai of Liberia during an official visit to the White House. Not a question about diplomacy, not a question about economics, peace, or leadership. Instead, he questioned his ability to speak English, as if that was the most surprising thing about an African president. This moment wasn't just awkward, it was insulting. It revealed everything wrong with how the West still views Africa, not as equals, but as anomalies when we display intelligence. Let's be clear. Joseph Boakai is not just any politician. He's a seasoned leader with decades of service, known for his calm intellect and statesmanship. And yet, his fluency in English became a subject of shock for a former U.S. president. The problem isn't just what Trump said, it's what it represents. Because behind the words, "you speak such good English," is a toxic idea that Africans are expected to be less, that our intelligence must always be explained, that speaking the colonizer's language well is still seen as a surprise. Think about it. Would this question ever be asked to a European president? To an Australian prime minister? To a Canadian official? Never. But when it's an African, suddenly our education, our fluency, our excellence must be justified. This is the face of modern discrimination. It's not always guns and chains. Sometimes it's a smirk and a question wrapped in curiosity. But make no mistake, it's condescension. The West has spent decades portraying Africa as poor, uneducated, and chaotic. Movies, news, charity ads, they all sell the same story. A continent in crisis, a continent in need. What they don't show are the African inventors building satellites, the African authors shaping global literature, the African doctors saving lives across Europe and America. Because to the Western lens, those stories don't fit the narrative. It's easier to be shocked when a president speaks English, if you've spent your life believing Africans shouldn't. But let's flip the script. Liberia was founded in the 1800s by freed African Americans. Its official language? English. Its system of government? Modeled after the U.S. So why is it shocking that Liberia's president is fluent? Because in the Western mind, Africa is still foreign, still othered, still less. Even when we wear suits, even when we sit at the table, even when we lead nations, the West praises African natural resources. They want our gold, our oil, our lithium, our cobalt. But respect for African leadership? That's still rare. They cut deals in private, then mock our accents in public. They invite our presidents for photo ops, then act surprised when they speak with power. This isn't new. For generations, Africans have had to prove their intelligence just to be seen. But now, it's different. Because this generation of Africans isn't asking for validation. We're demanding respect. President Boakai didn't flinch. He didn't clap back. He didn't need to. Because his presence alone, diplomatic, composed, and firm, was the answer. He didn't need to explain his education. He didn't need to prove his literacy. He is a president, elected by his people, chosen to lead, and his voice speaks for millions of Africans who are tired. Tired of the stares, tired of the questions, tired of the assumption that excellence doesn't come from Africa. Here's the truth the West won't say out loud. They don't fear a weak Africa. They fear a strong one. An Africa that speaks with clarity, that negotiates on equal terms, that demands fair trade, not aid. And that's what this moment revealed. When you question our ability to speak, you reveal your own inability to listen. When you're shocked by our fluency, you expose your own ignorance. And when you reduce an entire continent's leader to a language test, you show the world that racism has simply evolved, not disappeared. This isn't just about Trump. This is about every African student who's ever been told, "You're smart for an African." Every black professional who's been praised not for their work, but for their grammar. Every African diplomat who's been underestimated at the negotiation table. Enough. Africa is not asking for permission to speak. We've been speaking, loudly, clearly, proudly. It's time the world stopped being surprised and started listening. Because the next time an African president walks into the White House, the question shouldn't be, "Where did you learn English?" It should be, "What can we learn from you?" It didn't start with Trump. This mindset didn't appear overnight. It was built, brick by brick, through centuries of colonial propaganda. When European empires invaded African soil, they didn't just steal land. They rewrote what it meant to be civilized. They claimed their language was superior. Their religion was the only truth. Their customs were modern, while ours were primitive. Then they passed laws. They banned our languages in schools. They renamed our cities. They mocked our accents. They beat children for speaking in their mother tongue. And today, centuries later, we're still judged by how well we speak the language of our oppressors. That's what makes this question. Where did you learn such good English? So insulting. Because it comes from a place of historical amnesia. The West wants to act surprised, but they wrote the script. They broke our tongues and then act amazed when we use theirs fluently. But here's the irony. Africans speak more English, more French, and more Portuguese than most Westerners speak any African language. Many Africans are trilingual by age 10. They can speak their tribal language at home, a national language at school, and English or French for exams. Yet we're the ones being asked, "Where did you learn this?" It's not just ignorance, it's erasure. Let's flip this again. Imagine an American president visiting Senegal. He meets President Bassirou Diomaye Faye. Now imagine Faye saying, "Wow, your Wolof is so good. Where did you learn that?" It would feel absurd, even disrespectful. But when it's reversed, when an African speaks English flawlessly, it becomes a subject of shock and fascination. Why? Because Western superiority has always been built on one quiet belief. They need us. We don't need them. They see our universities as developing, our innovations as emerging, our leaders as corrupt until proven innocent. Meanwhile, their leaders can start wars, destabilize continents, and still be called civilized democracies. That's not just a double standard. That's white supremacy hiding behind diplomatic suits. Western media is not innocent either. They flood TV screens with images of African children with flies on their faces. They show huts, drought, famine, and nothing else. They don't show Lagos traffic jams from booming commerce. They don't show Ghanaian tech labs building solar-powered drones. They don't cover Rwandan healthcare systems outperforming some U.S. states, because they don't want Africa to be respected. They want it to be pitied, because pity allows control. Respect demands equality. And when African leaders walk into global summits and speak boldly, in fluent English with strategic vision and global awareness, it threatens the entire lie. So they reduce that moment to a compliment. "Oh wow, you speak well." As if that's the biggest miracle they've seen today. But here's what's different in 2025. Young Africans aren't tolerating this anymore. We are calling it out. We are posting it. We are naming it for what it is, coded racism. Social media has broken the monopoly on truth. Now we can show our own narratives. Now we can clap back instantly. And that's what's happening across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and X. Africans are rewriting their story, and the world is watching. Because you can't keep telling a lie when 1.4 billion people now hold the microphone. This is what the West is truly afraid of. Not our accents, not our languages, but our independence, our economic independence, our intellectual independence, our geopolitical independence. When Africa starts making its own vaccines, when Africa starts refining its own oil, when Africa starts building its own currencies, alliances, and AI systems, the West loses its grip. They can't control what they don't understand. They can't silence what they no longer fund. They can't ignore a continent that refuses to beg. That's what President Boakai represents. Not just Liberia, not just leadership, but the arrival of African confidence. A confidence that doesn't apologize. A confidence that doesn't shrink itself. A confidence that will no longer explain why it deserves to exist. So to those still surprised that African leaders speak perfect English, you should be more surprised at how long you've been allowed to stay ignorant. To those still treating Africa like a classroom, while the rest of the world is a boardroom, the bell has rung. Class is over. Africa isn't here to impress you. Africa is here to lead, negotiate, build, and command respect. If you're still shocked by our speech, wait until you hear our policies. Wait until you see our partnerships. Wait until you realize we're not asking anymore. The age of African silence is over. The era of African shame is dead. This is the time of African assertion. Our presidents don't need your praise for speaking English. Our children don't need to be told they're exceptional. Our nations don't need permission to rise. We are not your students. We are not your charity cases. We are not your mirror for white guilt. We are Africa. We speak. We lead. We belong. And from now on, we define the narrative.